Good evening, my name is David Schmoeller. I wrote and directed the movie you're going to see tonight, Crawl Space. I wanted to talk a little bit about how this movie came about. Crawl Space was made at the height of the video boom in the mid-'80s. This was a period when you had a lot of mom and pop video stores opening up all over the country, and they really needed a lot of product. They needed a little box with artwork and a title and a recognizable actor. Didn't matter if it was good or not. It just, they needed to see something they liked, and they would take it home and rent it for the night. So I worked for a company called Empire International, which was one of the largest production companies for these straight-to-videos. They weren't called that at the time, but they became known as straight-to-videos. And most of them had theatrical releases to some degree. But at any rate, Charlie Band owned Empire International, and at the height of Empire, he was making about 30 to 35 movies a year, and that's a lot of product. And the way he worked is, the way he came up with this product, he had about 100 people working for him, and he would have title contests. And if you came up with the title that he used, you'd get a $500 bonus. So he'd come up with a long list of titles. He'd pick the 75 or 100 best titles, they thought the most commercial titles, and then he would commission poster artwork. And these artists would just, with their own imagination, take a title and come up with something. And then he'd have these posters with the titles on them mounted, and he would 2 or 3 times a year, Austin First would come out from Vestron, from the East Coast, and he would come in to LA, and Charlie had these posters lined up around his office, all the way around. And Austin would come in and he would say, okay, I'll take that one, and this one, and that one. And he'd buy them in lots of 10 or 15. And they were given green lights at that point. They were going to be distributed, good or bad, because he needed the product. He had this pipeline he had to fill, and Charlie had to be the pipeline that was filling. And so he would then bring the writers and directors in the office, and he'd say, I want you to do this one and that one. And here are a couple of those titles that we did, just to give you, to illustrate. Here's a film I wrote called Ghost Town. This was the artwork. I was off doing another movie, and someone else ended up directing that one. Here's one that Stuart Gordon did called Dolls. This was the artwork, and he shot that while I was shooting Crawl Space. Here's one that I made after Crawl Space. It's one of my favorite movies. It's Catacombs, and this artwork gave me just absolutely nothing. And the movie has is no reflection of this artwork at all. This is one of my favorite ones, Huntress. This was what I was given. Bare-breasted she-beast. And I really liked the script. I didn't get it made, but it was one of my favorite projects. And then here's one of the early, this was after we had Kinski, and this is one of the early artworks for the poster. Now, Crawl Space actually didn't start, it started with a title, but it actually started with a set. And Charlie called me into his office, and he said, look, I've got this, I just finished this movie called Troll, and we built this apartment building, and it was expensive to build this whole apartment building. I want to use it again. And I remember you telling me about a story you had about a guy in a crawl space. And I said, well, I sold that. I sold that a couple of years ago to so-and-so. And he said, well, can you come up with another story about a guy in a crawl space? And I said, sure. So at that point, we had a green light, because we had this set. They didn't want to tear it down and start another film. They wanted to go right away. So I had to write a script to the set, and they gave me exactly what I had. I had X number of apartments with living rooms and bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens and hallways and stairs and an attic, big attic. And so I came up with a story which is nothing at all like the film you're going to see tonight. The first draft of Crawl Space was the protagonist was a man who had been a prisoner of war in Vietnam in a jungle camp. And I came up with a story about, and it started sort of mid-progress. He had returned he'd been released from the prisoner of war camp, and he came back home. His wife had divorced him. His parents had died, and he had inherited this apartment building. And he's already sort of already deranged. That's my dog. So he decides to recreate his prisoner of war camp in the jungle, in the attic. So he builds this huge jungle prisoner of war camp, and there are all these jungle traps, I think the notion basically was that he was somehow trying to go back in time, go back to before he was a prisoner of war, and maybe by doing that he would be able to get his life back but he's so far gone at this point, just from the very beginning. At any rate, so I turned the script in. They're already building the production designers already sending me drawings of this attic jungle set, and I was very excited about this jungle set in the attic. And anyway, I turned the script in to Charlie, and he calls me in a couple of days later. And I'm really just about a week or so away from flying to Italy to make the movie. And he says, I don't think America is ready to see a film about Vietnam. This is 1985. He said, and it's also the year right before Platoon was released, so Platoon sort of was the first big hit Vietnam movie. So he says, I'll tell you what, why don't we make the guy a Nazi? And I couldn't believe that he was saying that. And I said, so America is not ready to see a film about Vietnam, yet they want to see yet another film about a Nazi? And he said, yeah. And I'll get you Klaus Kinski. And I said, all right. You get me Klaus Kinski and I'll make him a Nazi. So, be careful what you wish for. Enjoy the movie.